He was just 18 years old, full of life, full of promise. Jabari Peoples wasn't just another teenager. He was someone's son, someone's best friend, someone with big dreams ahead of him. He had just graduated high school. He had a job at a local hospital and was preparing for college. But on a quiet summer night in Homewood, Alabama, all of that was taken from him in a moment that still doesn't make sense. It was late, around 9:30 p.m. on June 23rd, 2025. Jabari was parked at Homewood Soccer Park with a friend, sitting in the car. Maybe they were talking, listening to music, or just catching their breath after a long day. But what happened next has haunted his family and his community ever since. A police officer approached their car, and within moments, Jabari Peoples was shot and killed. The official story says there was a struggle, that a gun was found, and that the officer acted in self-defense. But the people who knew Jabari say otherwise. They say he wasn't aggressive. He wasn't armed. He didn't pose a threat. And they're left asking the same question over and over. How did a routine encounter turn into a deadly shooting? There were no flashing lights, no warning sirens. The officer was in an unmarked car. It wasn't a traffic stop. It wasn't even clear to Jabari and his friend that this person approaching them was a cop. And just like that, in the middle of a peaceful night, tragedy struck. One shot, one life gone, no chance to explain, no second chances. In the days that followed, confusion turned into grief. Grief turned into anger, and anger into a demand for answers, for truth, for justice. The family was left in the dark for weeks, even learning that Jabari's autopsy had been completed without their knowledge. His funeral was delayed. Their pain was compounded by silence and stonewalling. This wasn't just about one incident. This was about a system that too often denies families the dignity of knowing what happened to their loved ones. A system where body cam footage is withheld, reports are sealed, and accountability feels just out of reach. The name Jabari Peoples quickly became a cry for transparency, and a reminder that justice delayed can feel like justice denied. In this video, we're going to take you through everything we know about what happened to Jabari. We'll walk you through the night of the shooting, the official narrative, the family's heartbreaking fight for answers, and the growing calls from a community that refuses to be silent. Because Jabari's story matters. And his life deserves to be remembered, not for how it ended, but for everything it could have been. Jabari Peoples was just beginning to build his life. At 18 years old, he had graduated from high school and was already working as a hospital security aide, a job that reflected the responsibility and maturity people around him admired. He had dreams beyond his Alabama hometown, dreams that now would never come past. He wasn't a troublemaker. He wasn't known for being reckless. He was quiet, thoughtful, and driven, the kind of young man who made his family proud. The evening of June 23rd, 2025, wasn't supposed to be extraordinary. Jabari was out with a friend, parked at Homewood Soccer Park, a public place many locals go to clear their minds, catch up with friends, or simply sit in peace. It was a Tuesday, just past 9:30 p.m., and the area was calm. There was nothing unusual about two young people sitting in a parked car. But in a country still grappling with issues of over-policing and racial bias, that quiet moment quickly became dangerous. The neighborhood of Homewood is just outside Birmingham. It's a place where people know their neighbors, where kids play soccer on the weekends, and where parents trust their children to make it home at night. But it's also a place, like many across America, where policing can sometimes feel unpredictable, especially for young black men. Jabari's family had no reason to think he was in danger that night. He was doing what countless other teens do, talking, relaxing, and being young. But in today's climate, that normalcy is fragile. Police officers are trained to be suspicious. They're taught to act fast, to protect themselves first, and to assume the worst in situations that are calm on the surface. And in this case, a plainclothes officer driving an unmarked car claimed he saw a suspicious vehicle in the park, setting off a chain of actions that would forever change two families. What makes this story even more painful is that Jabari wasn't in the middle of any crime. There was no chase, no violence, no stolen car. He wasn't hiding, running, or resisting. He was just there, present, breathing, living, and in a matter of minutes, He became another name in a list of young black men whose lives ended in the presence of police. His family, still reeling, struggled to understand how things escalated so quickly. Why wasn't there a conversation? Why wasn't a parent called? Why did a peaceful moment end in the sound of a gunshot? The officer claimed he smelled marijuana, a common justification in countless controversial police cases. But even that detail remains debated. What's not debated is that Jabari walked into that park alive and never walked out. This context matters because it shapes how we view what happened next. Jabari wasn't just a subject in an incident report. He was a young man with a full heart, with people who loved him, and with a future that looked bright. Understanding the space he occupied, the way he carried himself, and the life he was creating is essential, not just for justice, but for dignity. Before anything else, Jabari Peoples was a human being, and that truth can't be lost in headlines or official statements. On the night of June 23rd, 2025, Jabari Peoples was sitting inside a parked car with a friend at Homewood Soccer Park in Alabama. It was a calm summer evening, the kind of night that feels quiet and still. To anyone passing by, it might have looked like just two young people hanging out. No noise, no threat, just a car in a public park. But within minutes, that ordinary moment turned into a fatal encounter. According to police, a Homewood officer, who was in an unmarked vehicle, approached Jabari's car after reportedly noticing something suspicious. He claimed he smelled marijuana and decided to investigate. There were no flashing lights or sirens to signal that this was law enforcement. No official traffic stop was called in, just an officer in plain clothes pulling up on a parked car, in the dark, without backup. The officer's account says he asked both individuals to exit the vehicle. Jabari, cooperative at first, stepped out. What happened next is where the story becomes contested and heartbreaking. The officer claims he saw a handgun in the door of the car. He said that when he tried to secure Jabari, a struggle broke out over the weapon. Within moments, the officer pulled his gun and fired once, hitting Jabari. But those who knew Jabari, and those who have seen portions of the body cam footage, are raising serious doubts. According to family representatives, the body cam allegedly shows that Jabari didn't resist, didn't reach for a weapon, and was not posing an immediate threat. In fact, some accounts say the officer fired within seconds of any physical contact, without time for Jabari to react or defend himself. One eyewitness reportedly present at the scene also challenged the officer's version, saying Jabari never reached for a gun and appeared confused, not combative.
Jabari Peoples, the 18-year-old shot and killed by Homewood police, is preparing to say their final goodbyes. Several funeral events are taking place this weekend in his hometown of Aliceville, including a public viewing that's happening right now.
Your reporter James Giles is live at that event. James, obviously a difficult day for the family, but we understand you have some updated information about this situation.
Yeah, guys, the Jefferson County coroner announcing today that he has completed the autopsy for 18-year-old Jabari Peoples, but says at the request of the Alabama law enforcement agency who's leading this investigation will not be releasing it, at least for right now. But meanwhile, here in Aliceville, lots of quiet moments and tears today as people in this tight-knit community see Jabari Peoples' body for the very first time since he was killed more than 2 weeks ago. Homewood police say an officer shot Peoples as he went for a gun. Family and friends continue to ask questions in this case, including a request to see the body camera footage from that night. Jabari's brother, William Peoples, says this weekend is about honoring Jabari's life, and the people who show up to remember him will speak volumes.
Everybody that's going to come is going to show what kind of person Jabari was and who he was as a person. An individual that is deemed as bad can't summon this many people to come vouch for him or come see him and kind of celebrate his life. It shows his character, it shows who he was as a person.
And tomorrow morning at 10 here in Aliceville, his family is holding a New Orleans-inspired parade in honor of Jabari's memory. They say that they're calling it his last ride home, leading up to the funeral, which will be held at Aliceville City Hall. They're asking people to decorate their cars, make signs, and come out to show support. Your reporter in Aliceville, James Giles, WBRC 6 News, on your...
And while police maintained that a weapon was recovered, the details around its location, handling, and Jabari's alleged interaction with it remain unclear. No fingerprints, no aggressive behavior, no time to de-escalate, just one deadly shot. To make matters worse, Jabari's family wasn't notified immediately. In fact, by the time they were informed, his autopsy had already been completed. That lack of communication only deepened the sense of injustice. They weren't given a chance to ask questions, to be present, to understand the timeline. What they got instead was silence, sealed reports, and growing suspicion. The night that should have ended with Jabari going home turned into the beginning of a long, painful search for truth. A mother lost her son. A friend witnessed a tragedy. And a community watched yet another young black life taken under circumstances that feel all too familiar. The facts of that night remain clouded by conflicting stories. But what's clear is that a young man who should be alive today was taken far too soon. According to Homewood Police Department, the events of June 23, 2025, began when an officer on patrol noticed a vehicle parked at Homewood Soccer Park after hours. The area had technically closed for the evening, and the officer reportedly found the parked car to be suspicious. He approached the vehicle, which importantly was occupied by Jabari Peoples and a friend, without the use of sirens or overhead lights. He was in an unmarked police car, dressed in plain clothes, and did not call in a standard traffic stop. In the department's version of events, the officer claimed he smelled the odor of marijuana coming from a vehicle as he approached. Based on that, he said he had probable cause to investigate further. The officer then asked both occupants to exit the vehicle. Jabari stepped out of the car first. This, police say, is when the situation began to escalate, though the timeline from that point forward is hotly contested. The officer stated that, as Jabari exited the vehicle, he noticed what he believed to be a firearm in the door compartment. This discovery reportedly caused the officer to attempt to detain Jabari on the spot. According to the official account, a brief struggle ensued, one that the officer interpreted as Jabari attempting to either access or retain the firearm. In that moment, the officer fired one shot, striking Jabari in the chest. Police emphasized that the shooting was not premeditated, but rather an act of self-defense under the circumstances. The officer later told investigators that he feared for his life and believed Jabari might use a weapon against him. That belief, they claimed, justified the use of deadly force. The department also noted that only one shot was fired, something they presented as evidence of the officer exercising restraint. In the days following the shooting, the Homewood Police Department released a limited public statement and confirmed that the Alabama law enforcement agency, lled, would handle the investigation moving forward. They made no initial mention of whether the officer's body cam was activated, though later reports confirmed that body cam footage does exist and has been reviewed internally. That footage, however, has not yet been released to the public or the family. The department also stated that a weapon was recovered at the scene, which they claimed supported the officer's version of events. However, they did not provide immediate forensic details, such as fingerprints, DNA, or whether the gun was loaded. In the absence of those details, skepticism from the public and from Jabari's family began to grow. Why, they asked, was everything being kept so quiet? Ultimately, the police narrative leans heavily on the officer's perception of threat, a subjective viewpoint that has come under increasing scrutiny in recent years. While the department has expressed condolences to the family, they have stood by the officer's account. But as we've seen time and again, the official version of events is just one part of the story. And in this case, it's a story the family and community are determined to challenge with everything they have. From the very beginning, Jabari Peoples' family questioned the police account. They couldn't understand how a young man with no history of violence, who had just graduated and was working at a hospital, could end up shot and killed in what was supposed to be a simple encounter. Their heartbreak quickly turned into urgency, a desperate need to find the truth behind what really happened that night at Homewood Soccer Park. Jabari's mother and loved ones describe him as calm, respectful, and deeply family-oriented. He wasn't the kind of person who looked for trouble, and they firmly believe he wouldn't have escalated a situation with a police officer. According to the family, the official story doesn't match the young man they knew. They say it was completely out of character for Jabari to resist or threaten anyone, especially someone in authority. One of the most troubling details for the family was the timeline of events after Jabari's death. They weren't notified immediately. In fact, by the time they received word that Jabari had been killed, his autopsy had already been completed, without their knowledge or consent. That decision devastated them. To not be present, to not be informed, and to learn about your child's death through secondhand channels only deepened the pain and suspicion. The family, through their attorneys, has demanded the release of the body cam footage, which they believe could provide clarity or even refute the police narrative entirely. Though they were told body cam footage exists, it has not been publicly released. What little they have seen or heard described leaves them unconvinced. According to those close to the case, the officer may have fired within seconds of approaching Jabari, before any real struggle even began. Adding to the doubt is the account of at least one witness near the scene, who reportedly said they did not see Jabari reach for a weapon or behave aggressively. The witness recalled a sense of confusion, not chaos, and said the shooting happened suddenly, without any loud confrontation or obvious provocation. To the family, this supports their belief that Jabari was not resisting and that the officer reacted too quickly. Jabari's loved ones have also emphasized the deep emotional toll of the delays. His funeral had to be postponed while they waited for documentation and access to information. Grieving in silence, without answers, left them feeling powerless. It wasn't just the loss of Jabari that shattered them. It was the way the system handled his death, as though his life was a closed file rather than a full beating story that deserved care and transparency. More than anything, the family wants truth. They want clarity. And above all, they want accountability, not just for their own peace, but for other families who may face the same nightmare. Jabari's name has become a rallying cry, not just because of how he died, but because of how much love surrounded him in life. His family is holding on to that love as they continue their fight, a fight for dignity, for justice, and for answers that still haven't come. In the weeks following Jabari Peoples' death, the pain of his family's loss was compounded by a heavy silence. They expected answers. They expected honesty. But instead, they were met with delays, closed doors, and withheld information. From the outside, it seemed like nothing was moving, as if Jabari's death had quietly slipped into bureaucracy instead of being treated with the urgency and respect it deserved. At the center of the delay was the autopsy report. Jabari's family wasn't informed until after the examination had already been completed, a decision that left them reeling. They had no say, no moment to process, no way to be present in the final steps of their son's journey. Even after the report was finalized, the Alabama law enforcement agency, lled, requested be kept sealed due to the active investigation, stalling the family's ability to move forward with funeral and closure. Body cam footage, which could be crucial in understanding the moments leading up to the shooting, has also remained out of reach. While officials confirm that such footage exists, it has not been made public. The city of Homewood has resisted the release of the video, citing state law and lled's ongoing investigation. For Jabari's family, this withholding feels like a wall, one that's keeping them from the truth about their son's final moments. Their frustration only grew when the city filed a motion to dismiss the family's public records request altogether. They argued that lled, not the city, possessed the materials, and that the documents were legally protected during an investigation. The family's legal team described this move as a charade, pointing out that if the city was truly committed to transparency, they wouldn't be hiding behind technicalities. These delays have impacted more than just a legal timeline. They prolonged the family's grief. Jabari's funeral, originally planned soon after his death, was postponed. Loved ones had to wait weeks to honor his life because key documents were inaccessible. That kind of waiting hurts in ways that can't be measured, because when you're mourning, uncertainty is its own kind of cruelty. Despite the obstacles, Jabari's family has continued to fight. Their attorneys have pushed for court intervention, while supporters across Alabama and beyond have joined in demanding the release of footage and reports. They're not just seeking justice for Jabari. They're shining a light on a system that, far too often, protects itself first and families last. A system that expects patience while offering none in return. The delays in Jabari's case speak to a broader issue, how slowly and selectively justice can move when law enforcement is involved. The longer the truth is held back, the more public trust erodes. Jabari's family isn't asking for anything extraordinary, just a basic human right to know what happened to their son. Until they get that, the case remains open not only in the courts, but in the hearts of everyone watching. The news of Jabari Peoples' death didn't just break hearts. It stirred a deep painful sense of deja vu across the community. Once again, a young black man had lost his life in a police encounter under suspicious circumstances. And once again, the people left behind were met with silence, red tape, and slow-moving answers. For Jabari's family and the broader public, grief quickly turned into a powerful call for justice. Not just for one young man, but for all those who came before him. In Homewood, Alabama, people gathered. They came with candles, posters, flowers, and aching hearts. They marched, they prayed, and they chanted his name, Jabari Peoples. Local organizers and national voices, including civil rights attorney Ben Crump, stood beside his family, demanding the release of body cam footage and transparency from law enforcement. Their message was clear. We will not let this case be buried in silence. For Jabari's mother, the toll was visible and raw. She stood at vigils, tearfully addressing the crowd, holding back sobs as she spoke about her son's gentle spirit, his future, and the dreams that were stripped from him. She wasn't just mourning, she was advocating, turning her sorrow into strength. But the pain behind her eyes told the full story. She had lost her baby, and nothing, not even justice, could fill that void. Across social media, the hashtag Justice for Jabari began trending in Alabama and beyond. People shared photos of him in his graduation gown, videos of him smiling, and messages of solidarity with his family. Young people in particular connected deeply with Jabari's story because it felt too familiar. It echoed the fear they live with, the tension they feel during traffic stops, and the questions they silently ask. Could this happen to me too? Community leaders and clergy members spoke out, calling for reform and accountability in how police engage with civilians, especially youth of color. If Jabari had been white, would he have been approached differently? One pastor asked during community town hall, would he still be here today? These weren't just rhetorical questions. They were wounds being reopened in real time. The emotional toll rippled far beyond Jabari's immediate family. Classmates, co-workers, neighbors, everyone who had crossed paths with him was shaken. His friends described him as calm, funny, and thoughtful. To them, the shooting wasn't just unjust, it was unfathomable. They couldn't reconcile the headlines with the person they knew. And now, they carry the weight of remembering him for the rest of their lives. More than a month after the shooting, the pain hasn't faded, and neither has the fire for answers. Jabari's name continues to be spoken, not just in anger, but in love. His story has become a symbol, not of victimhood, but of the need for change. A change in how officers approach the public. A change in how investigations are handled. A change in how we protect, value, and remember lives like Jabari Peoples. As Jabari Peoples' family pushed for answers, they quickly found themselves not only grieving, but also going head-to-head with a legal system that seemed determined to keep them at arm's length. What began as a cry for justice soon became a legal battle filled with motions, denials, and mounting frustration. Their requests weren't excessive, just access to the body cam footage, the incident report, and the full autopsy. But even those basic truths proved difficult to obtain. The city of Homewood responded to the family's efforts by filing a motion to dismiss their request for public records. In their argument, the city claimed that they did not possess the materials being requested, including the body cam footage, and that those items were in the custody of the Alabama Law Enforcement Agency, ALEA, which was still conducting an active investigation. Because of that, they insisted the materials were legally protected and not subject to public release. For the family, this explanation rang hollow. The footage clearly involved a Homewood officer, and the incident occurred within city limits. To be told that no one in the city government could grant access, even though they employed the officer involved, felt like a strategic deflection. It wasn't just about technicalities. It was about avoiding accountability, and that, more than anything, deepened the family's sense of betrayal. Their attorneys responded swiftly, calling the city's position a legal charade designed to delay justice. They argued that the family had a right to transparency, especially given the life that was lost. In a heartfelt public statement, the family's legal team expressed disbelief that a grieving mother would have to fight in court for the right to know what happened to her son, a right that should have been honored from the very beginning. The legal resistance didn't stop at documents. Efforts to push the city and Aaliyah to release footage to the family were met with repeated denials. Every filing, every hearing, every postponed response seemed to stretch out the family's pain. It felt less like a process of justice and more like a carefully controlled delay, one that forced the family to grieve in the dark. Meanwhile, public support grew louder. Activists, attorneys, and local community leaders began rallying behind the family's legal push. Petitions were signed. Vigils were held. Legal scholars weighed in on the need for clearer policies about footage release and family rights in police-involved deaths. The courtroom wasn't just a place of procedure anymore. It became the new battleground in the fight to honor Jabari's memory. Through it all, the family remained steadfast. Tired, heartbroken, and exhausted, but steadfast. They weren't just looking for punishment. They were looking for truth. And the more the system resisted, the more determined they became to expose the gaps in transparency and legal protection. Because in their eyes, Jabari wasn't just a name on a file. He was their son, their brother, their friend. And they weren't going to stop until someone answered for what happened to him. The story of Jabari Peoples is about far more than just one tragic night in Alabama. It taps into something deeper, something painfully familiar in America's long struggle with policing, accountability, and race. Jabari's death reminds us that the lives of young black men are still too often seen as threats before they are seen as human. His story is not an isolated incident. It is a reflection of a broken pattern that has played out far too many times. What makes this case especially significant is how ordinary the circumstances were. Jabari wasn't running from police. He wasn't involved in a crime. He was sitting in a parked car, talking with a friend. That simple act, something millions of teens do every day, ended in a fatal police shooting. When looking suspicious is enough to justify a life-altering confrontation, it forces us to re-examine what kind of world we've allowed to take shape. The delay in releasing body cam footage and the withholding of key documents also bring attention to a major issue in law enforcement: transparency. The fact that a grieving family has to go to court just to see footage of their son's final moments is heartbreaking. It shouldn't take public pressure and legal battles for families to receive basic answers. That lack of openness erodes public trust and deepens the wounds of those already in pain. Jabari's case has also reignited important conversations about the training and conduct of officers who engage with civilians, particularly young people. The officer who shot Jabari made a split-second decision with permanent consequences. But was that decision driven by real danger or by fear? And if fear alone justifies deadly force, then how many more lives are at risk from assumptions and bias? Beyond law enforcement, Jabari's death speaks to a larger need for reform in how systems respond to trauma. The lack of communication with his family, the autopsy completed without consent, the funeral delays. All of it shows how the process often prioritizes procedure over people. It asks families to wait, to trust, to be patient, while giving them nothing but silence in return. This broader significance is not about placing blame. It's about demanding better. It's about imagining a world where a young black man can sit in a car at night without fearing for his life, where justice doesn't move in secrecy, where a grieving mother doesn't have to become an activist just to be heard. Jabari's story is not just a moment in time. It's a mirror we're all forced to look into. As a society, we're faced with a choice: keep treating these tragedies like unfortunate coincidences, or start acknowledging them as systemic failures. Jabari's life and the questions surrounding his death challenge us to do more than mourn. They ask us to act, to speak, to push for a world where no more families have to suffer in silence, and no more futures are cut short before they begin. As we close this story, we do so with heavy hearts, because Jabari Peoples should still be here. He should be laughing with his friends, showing up for work at the hospital, preparing for his next chapter in life. Instead, his family is left with photographs, memories, and a growing list of unanswered questions. And we, the public, are left with a responsibility that goes far beyond sympathy. Jabari's story is a reminder of how fragile life can be when systems meant to protect end up causing harm. A simple night in a parked car turned deadly. A family that deserved transparency was given silence. A community seeking justice was asked to wait. But what happens when waiting turns into forgetting? That's where you come in. We can't change what happened to Jabari, but we can change what happens next. We can raise our voices, demand accountability, and push for reforms that ensure families aren't kept in the dark. We can support legislation that protects the rights of families to view body cam footage. We can urge police departments to be more transparent, more humane, and more accountable. This is also a call to compassion. Jabari wasn't a headline. He was a human being. So the next time you hear a story like his, don't scroll past. Don't let the details blur into just another statistic. Remember his name, share his story, and ask yourself what kind of world we're building for the next generation of young people like him. If you're watching this and feeling moved, don't let that feeling fade. Let it inspire action. Sign a petition. Attend a town hall. Speak up when systems fail the very people they're meant to serve. Change doesn't begin with grand gestures. It begins with ordinary people refusing to stay quiet. And if you knew Jabari, if you love someone like Jabari, or if you simply believe in fairness and truth, then carry this story with you. Keep talking about it. Keep asking questions. Because silence never brought justice, and forgetting never healed a wound. Thank you for listening to Jabari's story. If it touched you, please consider sharing this video, subscribing for updates, and joining us in standing with his family. Justice isn't something we wait for. It's something we work for together